everyone. How are you? I hope you are well. I did everything that I can to look alive right now, but truthfully, I am not. I am dead inside. And I do want to talk about why that is, because it has everything to do with this astrological weather, which I am a Leo moon, so we love the drama. So I always come on here and I'm like, hey, y'all suffering too? But like, this really is some monumental energy. And I want to preface by saying that getting through this energy, hi, my love, is incredible, because the other side of this is just complete like transformation and identity. It's a really, really, really fated time. The decisions that we're making and the ways that we're navigating these like torrential waters are very, very, very important. But I will say that when you're in it, when you're in the thick of it, it's a lot. Yeah, so tell me how you're feeling if you feel called to. I am feeling everything all at once. It feels like such... It is a lot, but I do want to talk a little bit about why, because this Thursday we do have a new moon in Gemini, which... It's not your average new moon. I'm in the thick of it. That's the only way to describe it. I will say everything is triggering. Everything is a lot. The energy is very, very thick, but there's a reason why. And I will say that typically with new moons, we always talk about how we want to manifest, right? How we want to focus on the intentions that we're setting for how we're moving forward. And like, this is the one new moon that I'm like, do not even touch manifestation. Like, we're doing no intention setting at all. What we're doing is we are releasing, right? And through releasing, we are making the space for what we want to manifest to sort of like be planted with ease, right? Especially because this is an eclipse, right? So eclipse season, I think this is the last eclipse of eclipse season, so thank God, because I literally cannot do it anymore. But eclipse season being coupled with retrograde season is all about a state of pause, a state of reflection, a state of who am I and how is what I'm thinking, what I am doing, how I'm showing up in the world, is that aligning with the identity that I'm choosing to have, right? This new moon is in Gemini, and obviously Gemini rules a ton of things, but it rules the mind, right? Which means it rules how we think, how we speak. So it's a beautiful time to really be intentional with like, how am I speaking to myself? How am I showing up in the world? What truth am I actually honoring? And is that in alignment with like my most optimal version of self? I've been feeling this Memorial Day. I need a break. And I will say June has no breaks, babe. I'm like, honestly, it's nice to know that I'm not the only one. And I had a morning session today where we were all just like collectively crying. But June is a really transformational month. It is the most transformational month that we will probably experience this year. So being intentional with the energy and not letting it drown you as much as it can feel, though. And I have some people that feel really empowered by it, because I think some people can navigate sort of like, it helps if you have like an inner planet that is also in retrograde. But I say all that to say that the way that we show up to the questions and the themes that are sort of presenting themselves in our lives right now has everything to do with who we evolve into outside of like this energy. So retrogrades are always calling for us to be really, really, really still, really present, and really observant with our physical environment, and how are we pouring into what that physical environment looks like. So if you feel stagnant, if you feel stuck, if you feel unheard, if you feel like, I deserve more in this regard or in this aspect, if you're not speaking on it, or if you aren't thinking in alignment with that. I read something about how this season, and specifically this lunar cycle, is the union of the mind and the heart, right? So if your heart is saying you want something, but the way that you're speaking to yourself or the way that you're speaking out loud is not in alignment with feeling deserving or worthy of that thing, there's a disconnect. And before anything externally can sort of fix itself, it all has to happen first internally. So it's making sure that like, how am I speaking to myself? Is there a truth that I am not honoring out loud? Am I playing a version of myself? Are there ways in which I am showing up in spaces that I have clearly outgrown, or that I'm shrinking myself for, just for the sake of, maintaining comfort for everyone else? Having really, really honest and clarifying discussions with yourself about your relationships and about just who you are and what your identity is and how you've been spending your time. Thank you for joining, my love. I think honesty is sort of at the forefront, and recognizing how do we dance with our triggers, right? Now is going to be a time when we are probably experiencing the most amount of triggers when it comes to the people in our lives or the events or the things. It's going to kind of come to the forefront of like, have you grown through this? Have you learned through this? Are you actually the evolved version of yourself that you claim to be? Which means, if you've learned these lessons and past versions of yourself, are you going to take those tools that you learned and implement them into how you move forward, which is a difficult thing to put into action in comparison to thinking about it. Like if I think, yes, I've grown, I've evolved, I no longer accept things that are below my worth. I no longer, that looks a little bit different than when you're like presented with like the physical opportunity to like say no or say yes or like speak on what you need and you don't do it. So right now is the time to like do it, right? And it's a lot. The season is intense. You know, the energy is incredibly thick. So especially with Venus being in Cancer, come back to like what nurture looks like for you, because we are undergoing such like tumultuous energy when it comes to like, am I really truly living and thinking and feeling in alignment with my best self? Give yourself the time to like rest in between those periods of like, I'm feeling a lot, especially because, you know, with Venus in Cancer, it's all about nurture. So whatever nurture looks like for you, if that means watching mindless television or creating artistically or finding, you know, safe spaces within people to speak on what you're feeling, make sure that you retreat to that and make sure that you have like a solid foundation in that, because you will need it, especially just for the month of June. I can't like the weather is just so crazy in the month of June, but the other side of it, I promise you, if you're intentional with working with like what themes are coming up for you, which mind you, whenever an eclipse happens or an eclipse season like this happens, the themes and the questions that you're asking yourself are not new, right? It's cyclical. So these patterns that are coming up, the ways in which certain relationships or certain job things are going have probably gone that way before, but now you're a more evolved version of self. Now you have learned, now you actually know, oh, maybe this is what's best for me and this is how I should approach it. But now you actually have to do that thing, right? It's like not, one thing is knowing what's best for you, the other thing is acting alongside that. So if you really do walk in alignment with your truth, the other side of this is like just an anchored foundation in the best possible version of you, and know that we are in a state of purging. So if there are any fears, if there are any anxieties, if there are any old habits that are coming up right now, know that being in a state of purging means that it kind of needs to come to the surface so that you can acknowledge it and kind of let it move through you. But, and especially with Saturn retrograde and Pluto retrograde both happening hand in hand, the way that we can implement sustainable change when it comes to purging these fears and purging these like attachments to outdated versions of yourself and outdated cycles is getting to the root of them. So now is a really important time to get to the root of like, why do I feel the way that I feel? Why do I not act in alignment with my worth? Why do I think that I deserve one thing? Why do I, you know, walk away from things or not execute? You know, what is the root of that? And what is the root of that? And what is the root of that? So really getting in alignment with like, I want to get to the bottom of this so that I can plant seeds of intention that are actually stemming from like true soil and not like surface level shit. So like, oh, I always choose people that like are fleeting and leave me. That's just because, you know, I like the bad boy complex. So I'll like start, you know, dating nice guys, right? Which is like the most surface level example. But like reviewing the fact that like, well, does that stem from like, I don't know, abandonment from certain people in my life, or maybe someone abandoning me in my childhood, and like, well, where did that come from for them? And like really going into the root of things, journaling through it so that you can understand what needs to actually be addressed in order to have sustainable change. That is a lot. I'm saying a lot of words. It's also worth noting that this new moon on Thursday is in the sign of Gemini, which rules the mind and it rules the words. So coming back to the belief that your words are spells, what is it that you're saying about yourself? And that can be in the most intentional manner and also in the most subconscious manner. So if you're like, girl, I am always going through it, or like, I never get things done, you know, recognizing like, what is it that I'm speaking over myself? And how can I be more present with my thoughts and the way that I just address myself out loud and to others? And is that reflective of like what the actual truth is? And also just coming back to truth, honesty, triggers, and like our relationship with rejection are kind of at the forefront right now. But, you know, just being honest with the way in which you've been pouring into perhaps your own suffering, perhaps your own stagnancy, and just knowing your worth, but not acting in alignment with your worth. And Mercury retrograde, which we are all just I'm so over this retrograde. It's ridiculous. Mercury retrograde is squaring Neptune. So I will say, just like on a practical level, now is not the best time to make a lot of like commitments or like sign any contracts, like just, or even big purchases. Like take your time a little bit with what it is that you're committing to. Really use this period of pause to be a period of planning. Like, okay, if I know and I see my mind's eye with clarity who it is that I want to be and what kind of version of life I want to live, how am I going to actually like implement the way that I think, the way that I act, and just the way that I align my mind and my heart and my voice most specifically with that reality. I'm all over the place, but of course I am. I do want to say that if there's any chakra to be intentional with, it is the throat chakra. So like wear blue, work with blue, and speak on your truth. So if there are relationships that you know, this is draining me, or I'm shrinking myself for this, or I am not, this is good. Because sometimes settling doesn't look like, accepting what's bad. Sometimes settling looks like accepting what's good, but knowing that there's something optimally better, that there's like a great that you could get instead of just a good. And knowing that if you need to speak on that, now would be the time, and that you deserve to speak on that. You deserve to have what is in alignment with your worth. But no one else will know your worth if you don't know your worth, and if you don't speak on your worth, which is just, it's tea, because I'm also experiencing that. And yeah, I guess that's like the main point of it. Just how can you shift how you think about yourself, how you speak to yourself, and how you act in alignment with what you believe your worth to be, and really seeing, like, proving to yourself first and foremost, have I grown? The universe doesn't test us. I don't believe in that. I don't think the universe is like, we put like some lessons in your path. Are you actually, I think it's more so like, can you prove it to yourself that you've learned how to navigate, just like these obstacles that are proving to you if you really can be the version of yourself that you've been working so hard at being. What is the point of all this self-care if you're just gonna like settle for who you've been comfortable being and who everyone else is comfortable seeing you as, right? Like, can you prove to yourself, like, no, I really did this. I've really poured into myself this past year, and how I show up in the workplace, how I show up within my friendships, how I show up to myself is going to reflect that. Hi, my love. I live in Chloe. Yeah, I'm basically finishing up. But if there are any journaling prompts that you guys are looking to work with, a couple I would suggest would be, what have you been subconsciously speaking into your reality? So like just reviewing the way that you talk to yourself, reviewing the way that you talk about yourself out loud, and just, like, what is your inner dialogue? Where have you been lacking honesty? So have you been honest with yourself? Have you been honest with others? Have you been honest in terms of like how you need to affirm your worth and call it in? And lastly, what needs to be shed right now to align yourself with the reality that you desire? And like 9 times out of 10, it's something that's going on internally. It's something that's going on inwardly. But in summation, this energy is thick. She's a baddie. She's thick. An eclipse in a retrograde season like this is always going to call for us to really like purge everything that's going on inwardly, so that we can look at it and have it look back at us, to understand the root of our issues, to understand where we're acting on places of fear, places of anxiety, places of like just cyclical habits that feel safe and comfortable, and how we can take that leap of faith, be a little bit brave with the way that we show up for ourselves, right? So speaking on our worth, taking the necessary action. Sometimes this is a dialogue just between you and you. Sometimes we can try to like project it onto things that are outside of us and say, well, I'm this way because of this situation, or I feel this way because my house is dirty, or I feel this way because this person is constantly. But sometimes, and especially with an eclipse in a retrograde season like this, the reflection is all inward, and it's like, I'm this way because I'm not taking the action that I've learned I need to take in order to feel better. So taking that action, implementing the lessons that you've learned, and proving it not to anyone else, not even to who you define God to be, but proving it to yourself, proving that you have control over how you feel. You don't have control over external circumstances, but you have control on how you arrive to it. So having a solid foundation in self, having a solid foundation in how you nurture yourself throughout this time, and ultimately knowing that you have community. I am going through it, y'all. The fuck? But I know that the way that I'm approaching the lessons and like the situations that I'm sort of maneuvering right now has everything to do with the version of myself I will be outside of June, and ultimately who I will be outside of like just this new chapter of my life. Every time we have an eclipse season, it sets the tone for who we are for like the next 6 months, and typically until the next eclipse season. So, really get clear on like what's going on here, and like how am I going to make sure that I'm living a life I actually want to live, and being the version of myself I'm choosing to be, and feeling empowered in choice. I've been speaking so much because, of course, there's so much Gemini energy, but I hope that you guys are well. Thank you. I've been seeing the comment, girl. Yeah, all of those letters is me. I am feeling it alongside you. If you want to ever reach out to me one-on-one, please do. But otherwise, we're getting through this together. June is a doozy. We're like 8 days in, right? Oof. Okay. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.